Coming up, Rich Hawes from DTV Digest is on. We'll be looking at the Scott Adkins film, One More Shot, so the sequel to One Shot. Now, we do talk about One Shot a little bit, but keep in mind that I had covered One Shot on that solo podcast episode I did on Adkins a couple years ago. My sort of Adkins mini film fest that I did when I was house sitting for my sister and brother-in-law. I watched 4 Adkins movies. I think it was Castle Falls, Hard Target. Oh, did you catch the mass accent there? Hard Target. Hard Target 2, Eliminators, and One Shot. I think those were the 4 films that I did then. So I didn't want to, it's kind of one of the things that I've covered it already. So it's one of the reasons why the DTVC Extra, a lot of times, I want it to cover non-DTV films because of this exact reason, is that it could step on movies that I could potentially talk about on the podcast with a guest. So, but we do talk about it a little bit. We talk about Adkins in general a little bit as well. But then, we get in and talk about one more shot, just kind of how that one goes as a sequel. So stay tuned for that. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. Next week, Chris Kavinsky from Bulletproof Action's on. We're going to be talking about Return to Savage Beach. I don't know why I drew a blank on the name there for that, but Return to Savage Beach. So we'll be looking at that. So little stars, a little talk on wrestling as well, because we've got Buff Bagwell in that film. Marcus Buff Bagwell. He plays the Warrior in that. So we got some good old-fashioned Vin Diesel retconning there, right, where he's a baddie in Day of the Warrior, and then in this new one here, they kind of twist themselves in a pretzel to make him into a good guy, which is fantastic. Anyway, so that'll kind of close out the month of September, which I can't believe we're already closing out the month of September. I thought, it feels like we just started September, right? Which I guess kind of did, right? I mean, if a month's only 4 weeks, right? You kind of just started before, and then you're suddenly done with it. But anyway, So that's what we got. So October is going to be a 5 Tuesday month, so that'll be good. We'll have 5 episodes in for the month of October, so stay tuned for that as well. In terms of DTVC Extra, still thinking about doing the Die Hard series for that, so that wouldn't be this week, but next week we'd be starting that. I'm still kind of not sure how I would break that down, if it would maybe be the first 3 movies and then the second 2, because the first 3 kind of come closer together, and then the second 2 are a little bit later. That was one idea that I had, so that might be how I do that. I think they're all on Paramount Plus, so I think that's how I'll watch them all there. So that's the plan, at least for right now, is to do those Die Hard movies, and kind of start that for our next season of the DTVC Extra. So be on the lookout for that in next week. And then in terms of the site, we just did Cinderella's Revenge, which again, podcast episode 157 also talked about Cinderella's Revenge. We had screenwriter Tom Joliffe in front of the site. He was on. So we've had Tom Joliffe on, for movies that weren't his, right? So we've had on for things like Army of One, and Cynthia Rothrock. We did a couple Cynthia Rothrock movies with him. So some other topics that we've had him on for, not just for his movies, but we've also had him on also to talk about other movies of his, like When Darkness Falls. So this was fun to talk Cinderella's Revenge with him. And then since the movie's now on Tubi, I figured I would cover it on the site as well, do a blog post. So that was the most recent one. This week, look for Shotgun, the PM classic. So we'll be covering that. And then in 2 weeks, Wanted Man. But then, when we get into October, that's usually our DTVC Hall of Fame induction month. So just to give you a heads up, this month, I don't think we're going to have, I don't have 4, I have to look at the numbers, but I don't believe we have 4 inductees. So it won't be, usually the whole month, right, is just posts inducting new members of the Hall of Fame. But I only have a couple that I think I'll be putting in there. So we'll see what happens. But maybe we'll add in some more. We'll see as we go. But that's kind of the plan for right now. And so so look for some Hall of Fame induction posts in October, but maybe some just regular old DTVC post. It's a regular post to just movies that don't induct anybody. But we'll see what happens there. So I think that is kind of everything. I was trying to think if I had anything else to mention here. But I think that gets it, because I'm kind of rambling as it is. So we might as well just cut the rambling short and jump into the podcast here. So we'll have John Crossman after Movie Diner playing our theme song. And then when we come back, Rich Hawes from DTV Digest is on, and we will be looking at One More Shot. All right. Welcome back to the Direct to Video Connoisseur podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I'm joined by very special guests, Rich Hawes from DTV Digest. Welcome back, Rich.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's great to be back.
Yeah, and in our episode this week, we're going to be looking at One More Shot. We were thinking about doing both movies, but I actually did one shot on this like Adkins film fest thing. I was house sitting for my sister and brother-in-law like in 2022, and I did a marathon of Scott Adkins movies, and that was one of the four that I watched at that time. So I was like, okay, I kind of already discussed that one.
Yeah.
But actually, other than that episode, and then when I had Simon Miller on from Explosive Action way back, I want to say in 2021, it might have been, we talked about
Yeah.
Avengement. I think that, and then a couple of times that Ty and I have talked about movies where Adkins has a small part. We haven't really talked Scott Adkins on this podcast, so I was kind of excited to talk about an Adkins film with you.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised. I would have thought we might have done it by now, but yeah, I guess we probably touched on I think because obviously we talked about Gary Daniels, and
Yeah.
there's a through line there with Gary Daniels and Scott Adkins. We might have touched on him at that point, but yeah, so good to get focus on an Adkins movie for a change, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Because I was thinking about that too. Because I was like, oh, it would have made sense. But actually, because the other thing too is that some of your earlier appearances on the podcast, we talked about movies that like you had maybe touched on DTV
Mm-hmm.
Digest, but don't really have
Yeah,
the ability to, like for example, Shadow Fury, right? I think that's the is that the name of the movie? Do I have the title right with
yeah,
Timothy Bottoms? Or
yes,
oh
yes,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. I love that movie. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a really fun conversation. So some of those kind of ones that were a little bit that didn't have big names in it. So we've kind of just been getting around to the big names. So you did do one big name. You did Steven Seagal with the Patriot. Um, so
yeah.
I don't remember if that was your first time on or I can't
I
remember.
think I think it might have been,
Yeah.
and always great to hear about Seagal. I actually listened to your episode recently about Flight of Fury, which was great. Um, some I can listen to Steven Seagal reviews all day. There's always different observations and stuff coming up, and that's a really interesting one. And I thought you
Yeah.
got the uh, the opinions you guys had of that was really good. But yeah, I'm still fascinated by Seagal and stuff. So yeah, Patriot was I really enjoyed that conversation because as I expressed at the time, uh, that's one of my favorites. Even though it's very light on action, I just think there's something special about it. A lot of people just don't like it at all, but yeah, I do like it. So if anybody's interested, go back and listen to that episode, and we'll really break that one down.
Yeah, that was a fun. I mean, I think the thing I'm finding, doing these episodes with Scott or like, doing it was with Scott Murphy from All 90s Action where we've been kind of covering
Yeah,
all this thing all DTV, but like, doing the Patriot with you or Mitch from Video Vacuum, we had him on to talk about one of the True Justice movies. It's fascinating. Just Seagal, I think for all the flaws and all of the things that you can say about him, which I think are absolutely valid, things that you could say, his movies always lend themselves to some really interesting conversations, and it seems like people gravitate to those as well.
yeah, definitely. And I think because as Scott was saying, like because he's so lazy, the workarounds and the things they have to try to do to fit around, his basically sabotaging the movies that he's making. That it's no wonder that they turn out the way they do. But they just, for me, when you're looking at the way they're made, it's quite interesting. Like you guys talked about that scene where um, the completely pointless scene that's basically a throwback to Hard to Kill, where the convenience store robbery
Oh
scene,
yes.
which they basically make um, the gas station robbery, where the overly armed um, guys come in. And I swear, because I haven't seen the film in a while, but I seem to recall when I saw it that I don't believe that Steven Seagal was filmed with those guys, that they shot his stuff all, solo. They only shot his stuff and then they edited it together and they used some, so then they both, and they've done, I mean they've done that many times before at other things with them, when they employ doubles and stuff. But I swear I'd have to go back and watch it, but there might even be a bit of less doubling in that, and um just just editing to try and show that one person is pointing something at him and then he's pointing something, or he's hitting them. Like there's no actual contact between them that I remember, but I'd have to go back and and check it out. I just remember that being quite a fascinating scene. And there was, there's been other examples about like Exit Wounds where there's a scene with him and Tom Arnold, and it's only close-ups of their faces, as far as I remember. There's never like a two-shot or anything of them. So whether that was just they didn't want to be in the same room together, I don't know. But I swear that that scene was, there was no sort of pull back shot that showed them both having a conversation that I remember. So sometimes my memory plays tricks on me, but I'm sure that, but I know for a fact that Steven Seagal doesn't like to be around most people, and based on the experience, because from the amount of films I've watched, it's too common a theme. Like there's a film in the film Submerged that he did. There's a massive action sequence that takes place in a tunnel, and it's got a tank and everything. And when I originally watched it when I was younger, I thought, wow, Seagal's there and he's doing all the stuff. And then you get older and you realize, oh no, that's all his double, and he's just there for the close-ups. He wasn't there at all, was he? He was never there. It was all just Vinnie Jones and the others. They turned up.
Right.
But,
I remember seeing an interview Gary Daniels did. Like, for example, in that interview, he talked about Recoil, right, which we covered in a previous episode. And he was like, oh, that's one of my favorite movies. Spiro Rosatos was action director on it. I always loved that one. And then somebody mentioned Submerged, and he was like, yeah, I'm not talking about that one. I'm not like, that's it. No, the less said about that, the better. But I don't want to get into it. And so, again, similar situation, like you said, like, they just, a lot of these actors that work with him, bad experiences. I mean, obviously, there's with Scott and I talked about Shadow Man with Imelda Staunton, where she was just like, she was appalled that he didn't do any scenes with her. She's like,
well, exactly, yeah. Another one where he didn't turn up,
Right.
so she's shooting with somebody else, and then they just edit it together. It's just like if he can't even turn up for Imelda Staunton. That's
Exactly.
unbelievable. But
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's a really great. It's an interesting lead in here, but I think it's like the contrast here between Seagal and Adkins, with Scott Adkins, who's the star of the movie One More Shot that we're going to be talking about, because I mean, especially in that period where I think it's like 2019 when Avengement comes out, he does like Triple Threat and a few others where Accident Man, I think, I can't remember if that comes out that year as well, or maybe slightly before that, but he's kind of the opposite. Yes, sometimes he does movies where he's only got a very small part in the film, but when he's in the movie and it's based off of him, you don't get you. It's like he's like the opposite of Seagal. He's like sort of the yin to Seagal's yang, I guess, or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anybody who gives as much, as Scott Adkins does. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who are doing pretty good stuff. I mean, even the older generation, Dolph Lundgren is still putting himself out there. He's making an effort. And then you've got on the other end, you've got people like outside of the action sort of guys specifically. You've got people like Liam Neeson. They're all getting up there. I mean, look at people like Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
He seems as busy as it's not action stuff, but he was doing Marvel and different and a few other different movies, and obviously got the Beetlejuice movie out and stuff. And he's like he's over 70 now. All these guys are in their ages are well up there and around sort of Seagal's age, and there's just no excuse to be as lax as Seagal. But yeah, Scott Adkins is he's been around in the business for quite a while now. What, 25 years or something, and this is he's really grown. I mean, he started out as just a handsome guy who does fighting, and then he got to the more leading roles, got to play characters. He very much puts himself, he considers himself an actor, not just an action star, screen fighter. He really wants to play characters, and that's almost more important to him than the fighting, or equally important to how he's presented. And if anything, the fighting stuff is kind of, it has to make his character and make the film. That has to be, because he understands as time has gone on, that's what people are looking for. Boyka really cemented that. the character he played in Undisputed 2, which was the first film he did with Michael Jai White. You know, he really became a character that came to define him, basically. I mean, there hasn't been a Boyka. He made 3 films as Boyka. There hasn't been a one since then, and it looks like there's probably, you know, rights issues and stuff. I think there probably won't be any more actually rights issues, maybe, but I know piracy was a factor on the last film, that it didn't perform as well as they were hoping. So it'll probably be difficult to get financing for another Boyka film, potentially, or he just wants to move on. I'm not sure, but you know, he started out with the Boyka character, and then say you touched on Avengement earlier. I thought that was another huge step forward with his action acting. You know, kind of, because that like the Boyka stuff, you know, he really delivered as a character, you know, that really is so different to himself. You know, you quite often see Scott Adkins with no makeup and stuff, and just maybe with, you know, like in this film, you know, he's got a beard, he puts on an American accent and stuff, but that's the extent of it. There's quite a lot of films where he does that. But then when he gets to, you know, sort of really, you know, go into a character like Avengement, where they shaved his head and put the false teeth in and stuff, and actually he starts out as the handsome guy at the start, but then he transforms. You know, that's what's so great about it. Well, actually, it's in flashbacks. He's, you know, the first time we see him, I think he is, you know, the man he has become. But then we see the story come back. But yeah, so Boyka, we've never actually seen Boyka's transformation. We've only met him we've seen him transform from the villain to the hero or anti-hero, but we've never seen sort of his journey beyond that. They've never done a young Boyka or anything, thankfully. I don't think I'd want to see that. But yeah, that's.
I was gonna say quickly, it'd be like those Rise of the Foot Soldier movies, right, where they keep making prequels and the actors keep getting older, right? Like, so Adkins is gonna be older than he was when he's playing the younger version of himself.
You know what? Actually, I'm in. Let's do it. I'd say, because I actually really like those Rise of the Foot Soldier movies, and I think it does amaze me how you have to just go with it. You have to,
right?
I mean, John Travolta did a film called oh God, Speed Kills, I think it was, where he was trying to play a character. It was a biopic, so he was trying to play a character at different ages, and he was like trying to play him as like a college student age or just out of college or something, and people were laughing at that and stuff, whatever. And I was just going with it, you know. And so a couple of the recent Foot Soldier movies, they have had a couple of the actors say, literally playing the same character, a bit like, you know, I think I've said this in other places, maybe on this show. These Rise of the Foot Soldier movies are kind of like the British gangster movie equivalent to like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or something like that. So they just keep adding these stories, adding these movies, and with these characters. There's another one going to be coming soon. I mean, they keep getting more and more successful, it seems. So I don't think that will stop anytime soon. But yeah, so the idea of a Boyka throwback or something with Adkins, like, I don't know. And they could, you know, that's the other thing with these Foot Soldier movies. They don't have the money to do like a Martin Scorsese thing and just de-age everyone, or even Marvel, you know, or with the big Hollywood movies where they can just de-age. You know, Tom Hanks is de-aged in one of his new movies as well, isn't he? But there's just no money to do that with these more low budget movies. So Scott would be. They'd have to be using a lot of makeup and stuff and trying to sell it as younger Boyka. So maybe you're floating an idea there. You know, it's like
because you're absolutely correct about this. That I think it's the one thing about Adkins that maybe we could, you know, look at like kind of setting it apart from the other. I mean, like obviously, you know, Van Damme, I think with Luke Devereaux in the Universal Soldier, that's kind of a character who's resonated and stuck. But most of the time, right, he does his movie and then it's DTV sequels. But yeah, I mean, Atkins and you know, the other person we're going to be talking about here in a bit, Michael Jai White, he thought he was going to be the one, right, doing the Undisputed sequels. He thought, okay, this is going to be my franchise. And then the Boyka character, I think it just resonated with so many people that he was able to make this character out of it. It from a DTV franchise standpoint, it is very unique in that sense that it's the same character, and he's been able to grow that character. You almost feel like, yeah, maybe he feels like he's done enough with it, but on the other hand, you kind of feel like it would be nice to kind of, yeah, like, it feels like there's more to tell from that character as well.
Yeah, and the um yeah, the sorry, the God, that's my train of thought there. So the what was the other character he did? Speaking of Jean-Claude Van
Okay.
Damme, obviously he did do the Universal Soldier movie, which was brilliant. That was another one of his great performances. Again, playing an American, you know, he's looking, you know, he's got his typical Scott Adkins look, putting on the American accent. Fantastic fight scenes. But really, that film was kind of delving into the psychology of the character and stuff, which I thought was
Mhm.
really interesting. Those two, John Hyams, that one and the predecessor, where you know they really subvert your expectations with the Luke Devereaux character. That's where I was trying to go. The Luke Devereaux character.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, they really took that character to some dark places, which is amazing. I don't think John Hyams has equaled, unfortunately, the work he did on the Universal Soldier franchise. I think he's always an interesting guy to see what he does next. But I haven't seen him do anything as viscerally impressive as those particular DTV sequels. And yeah, so the and Scott Adkins say if you look at a lot of these DTV successes and what are the good DTV action movies or whatever, Scott Adkins is there. He's always the one. And yes, he appears in some of the stuff that's not so good. He will be in um, films like what was it called? Oh, Dead Reckoning. He
Yes.
sort of has a supporting role in something, or a sort of a mid tier sort of low budget action movie like I confess I haven't seen it, so I can't judge it. But Section 8, which I hear
Oh,
isn't amazing.
so he's
Um,
a very, very small part. That's the problem. So that was one of the ones that Ty and I discussed on a previous episode. What we got a kick out of in that movie was Dermot Mulroney, which
mm,
led to us doing an episode of two of his movies. But yeah, the Adkins character is very small in it. He's like an assassin who Mulroney hires to kill the main character, who I can't remember that actor's name. Um, but it's not an actor that I really knew. Quantin, Brian
Ryan
Quantin.
Kwanson. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Dolph also has a very small part in it. It's interesting because you see like these movies that Dolph and Adkins has done, other than Castle Fall. I guess Legendary. They both had pretty good sized scenes in there together. But yeah, it's because it's Christian Sesma, I believe, right? Yeah. So Sesma,
Yeah.
I guess he must be friends with Adkins because he also used him for a very small part in Lights Out as well, which is another one of his
Mm.
movies. That one had Frank Grillo in a bigger role.
Yeah, and you often see Adkins does get these bit parts as an assassin or as a hired gun of some description. He turns up in a lot of those roles in films of various budgets. Sometimes it's a really big budget thing or something that he just appears in briefly, like the Bourne film that he appeared in. Just has a sort of a which Bourne one was it? Bourne
Oh, let's see. Yeah.
Ultimatum. It was
Okay.
Ultimatum. So yeah, he has like you know just sort of like a supporting, come on, do the fight scene kind of thing. And that continues to this day because his character might be a bit more fleshed out, but he's going to be, I mean, Killer's Game I think is already out stateside, so we haven't got a release date here in the UK
Oh,
yet, but that's another
no,
one
we're
where
not.
he's
Not. So we're listed. It's listed as post production here in the U.S. as well. So,
oh, it's not
uh,
out yet. Okay.
yeah, we're not quite there. Oh, that's right. Oh, why did I say a Killer's Game? Of course, I'm thinking of that's coming out this Friday. In
Right.
the theaters on Friday.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so Killer's Game, he's got uh, another one of his. Say that's gonna. Is that wide theatrical or is that limited?
yeah, it's wide theatrical. So actually,
It's wide. Okay.
interesting because yeah, I forgot because we're recording it, it's going to be, but it's going to actually be. But when people listen to this, it'll already be out. So, yeah, it says AMC Dine In is the main theater near me,
Mhm.
in Center City, Philadelphia, and it looks like it's going to. It doesn't look like it has a lot of. It has like four showings, but it is. I mean, it is there. I didn't even think of this. I could even go see it there. I didn't even think of that. That it's showing here. I mean, my hunch is, if I were to guess, it's going to be a movie that's not going to be in the theaters for that long. Maybe a week or two, which is kind of frustrating because I think life, at our age, it takes, sometimes it's not so easy just to go the first weekend that the movie's out to see it. And so,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's another one where, I mean, in part that sort of links to Scott's involvement in John Wick franchise. He came in
yeah,
John Wick 4, got to play a character. Some people didn't like it, the whole fat suit thing and stuff. But I think I thought that was really interesting, and so you get again Scott getting to do something a bit different and not what people are expecting, but still delivering on the action front. And then he gets another hired gun role in say the Killer's Game. And there's loads of, I mean, there's loads of them in the past that he did. Tournament is a good one.
oh yes,
This was a
yeah.
Scott Mann film, I think, with which has
I think it's got
which was
Kelly
all shot in
Hu.
the UK, and yeah, exactly. It's got a really good cast: Ving
Yeah.
Rhames and Robert Carlyle and stuff. That's a really cool film where again he turns up, he has just like plays the assassin, doesn't really get to flesh out the character, but then he gets to do the stuff that he's done with Jesse Johnson
Yeah.
and the films like The Debt Collector, where
Mhm.
he gets to really play a character who's closer to himself. He's using his natural, basically his natural accent, and he can be, he doesn't have to wear any makeup and stuff. He's just kind of showing his natural charm and abilities and whatever in roles like that. And I thought the two Debt Collector films were brilliant, and it's also great to see when he does say something like a John Wick, or sort of like Accident Man. Again, Accident Man's linked to a bit like with the Debt Collector movies. Is it's a much more natural Scott Adkins in that, but it's it's really good. He's playing to the strengths. He never used to get to in his earlier roles. He had to either be quiet or put on pretend to be American, or just be in the background or something. And now he can be a British action hero kind of thing, which I really like. I love the fact that he's been able to make the two Accident Man movies where he can play an English character. In Debt Collector, he was able to be English, and he still has to lean into. I know he probably enjoys playing American, because again he's an actor and he likes to do accents and things. So he's probably enjoying the fact, like in the One Shot movies that we'll get to shortly, he's playing an American character in those. But I do enjoy it when he's playing, say, English heroes or anti-heroes, I should say, generally.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry, I was
Oh,
just.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say, because it seems like Jesse V. Johnson, whenever he casts Atkins uses his natural accent, and then Isaac Florentine uses him either as an American or with Boyka, he's a Russian, which is interesting, right? That Isaac Florentine's always having him not use his English accent, and Jesse V. Johnson, I think, insists on it almost. Like the character's always English, and I guess Jesse V. Johnson being English himself, probably that's probably part of it, that he likes the idea too of him representing England that way.
Yeah, same goes for James Nunn. Again, who's the director of this film, who, as with Jesse Johnson and Isaac Florentine, is a director who Scott continues to keeps working with, makes multiple films with, and they did Eliminators, which was a film that,
Yes.
well, actually their relationship goes back before that. They did Green Street 3, which was a very left field sequel to a football hooligans movie, which originally had Elijah Wood in it.
Yes.
And then there was Jesse Johnson did a low budget second part, and then for the third part, James Nunn came in and they made it into essentially like a tournament fight film, but with football hooligans. It's mad, but it kind of works, and I did really enjoy it. And again, Scott got to play. It wasn't his own accent. I think he was playing from a different region of the country of the UK. But I really liked what they did with Green Street 3. It's a film that, you know, it sounds ridiculous. The title just sounds ridiculous, and you know, it's a film, and the concept, it shouldn't work, but it's very, very entertaining. I really like it. It's got a great cast. People, you know, fans of British action and British low budget, you know, the action world. There's so many sort of people in it that you know, and you know, that you're familiar with, and the concept's just so much fun. And that's from that springboard, they've gone off and say they did Eliminators, where they also shot in the UK. Great, you know, it was great to see them start actually making films in the UK with Green Street 3 and Eliminators. But Scott played an American in that one, which was probably the only thing I didn't like about it. I would have much preferred it if they had just made him a British agent or something. And and then they've gone on. They reteamed and then did One Shot and stuff. And he's worked with, you know, obviously he's worked with loads of other people over the years. I mean, for anyone who's not familiar with him, his filmography is huge. So it can take you a really long time to work through, especially if you start doing all the side, you know, the supporting appearances and things. But you know, the essentials are, you know, the Boyka films. You got to see, you know, he's again hired gun kind of role. Expendables 2. You got to see him fight Jason Statham and stuff. You got to see the Universal Soldier movies. His work with Dolph Lundgren, I think, Legendary gets a kicking, but I actually quite enjoy that. It's not a martial arts film. It's not an action movie. It's a monster movie, but it's got some. It's a bit overambitious. It's basically a Chinese film that has Hollywood stars in it. so it's, and the budget's really tight, but I don't know, I get a kick out of that one. But then Castle Falls was a good one. There's actually a few that I haven't seen that I do need to rectify. So he did Jarhead 3, another DTV sequel there. Savage Dog with Jesse Johnson, which is a major oversight because I hear that one's really good.
You'd really like that one. I could definitely say. I would almost venture to say, like, I'd be bold enough to say that I think if you watch that one, it might even be your top 5 of his movies. Savage Dog. I think a lot of people have. I think it's in my top 5 of his movies. I'm not counting. Like, I kind of separate his DTV with his, you know, the big budget things like Doctor Strange or, you know, those kinds of, they're like John Wick. But yeah, I think you'll really enjoy it for sure.
Yeah, and I do want to. It was on Netflix over here for a while. I think it's gone now, but I will, next time I come across it. Definitely going to try and prioritize it. He's actually got he hasn't had that many. I think One More Shot that we're going to get to is his to date. His most recently released starring role. But he does have another film called Take Cover, which is scheduled for UK release in October. So we're not that long to wait for that one. And then I think he's got a couple of others, but most, you know, various other things that he's done are supporting appearances. But he's a very busy guy. He's got a massive slate. You know, you've only got to check his IMDb to see he's got like 6 films coming, and you know, he's the star of like half of them. So I think, you know, Scott's going to be around for quite a while yet, and he doesn't show any signs of slowing down. And you know, with the fact that when he throws himself into films like One Shot and One More Shot with the same kind of zeal as he you know, for playing like a 5-minute character or 5 to 10-minute character part in like John Wick or something. You know, he's one of those guys who just really gives his all, and you know, almost always gives the audience what they want. Sometimes the films he's in aren't as good as we want, and they're not as good as he wants. You know, so he generally, I know he's quite insistent where possible to have as much control as possible over how the action looks and how the film is overall. He's not yet taken a sort of a leap into directing, but I could certainly see him following, Dolph Lundgren's path in doing, or Clint Eastwood or whoever you want to name, who's somebody who's stepped into the director's chair. But I'd definitely be interested to see what a film directed by Scott Adkins would be like. I think it would be a very good product.
Yeah. Well, and to your point about that is that he's if you when you look at his filmography, like you said, he's still working a lot. But now
Mm.
you start to see like the director, he's starting to kind of call, like he's either only working with directors like, big names or well, people he's worked with before, right? Like Nunn, what was I going to say? Sesma. He seems to be working a lot with Christian Sesma lately. But then, you look at some kind of the newer stuff. I mean, actually, I don't know. I say that he's doing a movie in Egypt. He's doing another one of those Egyptian movies called Wherever You Go. He's still doing those kinds of things, but he's also doing like, yeah, he's either doing big budget things, whether they're straight to Netflix, they're big budget Netflix movies, or big budget theatrical movies. Um, uh, but he's doing that kind of thing, or he's working with directors he's used to working with. So I wonder too, like you said, with the quality aspect of it, he's kind of similar the way that Dolph has started to direct his own movies because he wants to control the quality. I wonder if in his case he's saying like, okay, I'm gonna maybe continue to work as often as I do, but I'm only gonna work with people that I trust and that I know are gonna put me on the screen in a way that makes me look good.
Yeah, or he might work with somebody he's not worked with before, but the people, maybe like the co-stars and stuff
Yeah,
are people he's with. So he's kind of gone in like Lewis Mandela. He's worked,
yeah.
he's, for many years now, debt collector movies and stuff. He does a lot with Lewis. He's gone. Lewis is directing a new film called Death March, which Scott's starring in. They're both going to be working together in the fourth Skyline movie called Skyline Warpath, which has also got Iko Uwais in,
Oh
who
yes.
Scott worked with on Triple Threat, um, for writer director Liam O'Donnell, who who's so I'm expecting great things from that team. He usually works with same choreographers and action designers and stuff. But yeah, so every now and again he'll take a role, and it just for some reason it just doesn't pan out. I mean, things like the Egyptian stuff doesn't. I think that's quite it's interesting that he does those things, but they're I think maybe the fight scenes and stuff he gets, probably gets a fair bit of control over, but basically he's there as like a day player essentially,
Right.
and the rest of the film is kind of, I'd rather say this new Egyptian one is, a comedy. So it's like a looks like a knockabout comedy that's going to have a
Mhm.
little bit of a, he's going to turn up as like a villain for like 5 minutes or something. That I presume.
Right. Yes.
Whereas the previous Egyptian film he was kind of a consistent. You kept coming back to him, and then they did something with him and stuff. But it was still kind of um, I think it was yeah. I wouldn't say paycheck, just a paycheck role, because I think he enjoys, sort of working in different cinemas, working in different, international cinema. We've seen plenty of actors go. I wouldn't be surprised if Scott took a role, in an Indian film or something. That would be really interesting to see. I would actually love that. I think if he turned up in um, like a Bollywood movie, I think that would bring the house down. Because there's a lot of crossover now between um, Bollywood action is to a degree now, and the budgets again, so big that some of them are even better than the Hollywood movies, and Hollywood actors are going over and starring in these movies. Some of them are doing little roles and stuff. So yeah, I could definitely see him doing something like that, and not just in addition to all these things and the John Wick stuff and stuff. So yeah. Um, Scott is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one other name that's in this. Now, I think we'll touch on him briefly. I think at some point probably he's one who's long overdue for having a spotlight on his movies. But Michael Jai White is in this as well. He plays the baddie in One More Shot. This is the fourth time he and Atkins have starred together. They did Undisputed 2, Accident Man, and Triple Threat as well. So two movies with Jesse V. Johnson. So this is the fourth time they've been in movies together. But I think when I was on your podcast, we talked about Michael Jai White because we did Blood and Bone. I think was that the throwback we did for that one.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Yeah, and then Take Back was we talked about Welcome to Sudden Death. Is that what it was called?
The Sudden Death remake.
Right, exactly. Right.
They weren't quite sure what they were making. It's like I think we were I said it was like it feels like a sitcom. Yeah, it's like it's got these sets and stuff. It feels like you're watching Full House or something. I don't know. It's an odd film. It's got like this. Yeah, it didn't quite deliver, and also the title makes no sense because it's a different sport in that movie. So yeah, Welcome to Sudden Death, not a shining example. A couple of nice bits of action, and Michael Jai White charm in there, definitely. But yeah, definitely not what was hoped for, especially when you compare it to the original. Geez.
Yeah, well, exactly right. The original is just absolutely amazing. Yeah, we get reminded every so often on Twitter with Will from Exploding Helicopter when he shows that fantastic end exploding helicopter sequence there with Powers.
Yeah,
Booth.
I watched it recently on TV. I could only watch it very quickly because we were in a hotel room and I had to keep the volume down. But
yes.
It was still great to see it. It's the most nonsensical direction. They literally just drop it vertically. It's just it's crazy, but it's very memorable. It's great. It's a fun movie, and one of Van Damme was kind of at his kind of peak there. Probably peak cocaine use as well, but like mid-90s, him and Peter Hyams, the double whammy of Time Cop and Sudden Death, they did great stuff.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately the Welcome to Sudden Death didn't feature a fight with a penguin and mascot or a mascot of any description, basically, as far as I recall. But but again, Michael Jai White is a guy who's really consistent, really puts in the work, does a lot of films that do disappoint, it has to be said. But then he tries to, again, really invest himself and, take back control and do something he really wants to do. And he directed, unfortunately, I missed my chance to see it when it was on Prime. But he directed Outlaw Johnny Black.
Oh, yes,
which
very
was
good.
A passion project of his, which I really do need to see, which I think was kind of in the same or reteaming or kind of in the same vein as Black Dynamite, which was a kind of a crossover breakout cult hit, which not an action movie, is like a comedy. It's like a Austin Powers-ish kind of thing, right, but really showcased his comedic abilities and stuff. And he's the Outlaw Johnny Black is surprisingly like a 2.25 hour Western comedy. It's not a good it's not a standard kind of sell thing, but he managed to get it made. It looks great, but I just haven't had a chance to catch up with it yet. Partly when I did have the opportunity, it was that running time that was sort of slowing me down. I was thinking I haven't got time to watch a 2 hour 20-minute movie at the moment. But yeah, so he's done he does these thrillers like what was it, the Take Back one, which he did with his wife. He was more the supporting role in that one, called The Commando. He did with Mickey Rourke. He's done a couple, actually. Tom Berenger is in One More Shot. He's done a couple. I think he's done a couple with Tom Berenger, but As Good as Dead, I think, was a Berenger. And was there Cops and Robbers as well?
Yeah, that's what it was called. I was trying to think of the name of it, but I think you're right. I think it's Cops and Robbers. Yeah.
I have to say this. I looking at his filmography. I love Michael Jai White, but there are quite a few of his films that I just haven't caught up with lately. There's a couple that I have seen that I've been quite disappointed by, and I think it's not Michael Jai White that's putting me off seeing these movies. It's the other thing. It's like I see, it looks like one of the films you and Ty are talking about that you're disappointed by consistently. So I just go, maybe I'll park that one for another time or something, and then I'll just wait and look for something, of a standard. There was a film we made called The Island, which was reasonable. I did see that one, but films like One More Shot, which unfortunately he doesn't have a massive role in. His scenes are quite few, but it's good to see him there. But he doesn't tend to unfortunately turn up in films of that caliber very often. It's the heyday, the best, his best films really are from that earlier stage of his career. I think a film like Triple Threat, I thought Triple Threat was really good, and he made a very good contribution to that one. That is a must see. Seeing him turn up in Accident Man with Scott Adkins again. The Never Back Down films, he was kind of he came in as the replacement for Jimon Honsu for the DTV sequels, and they kind of put him front and center in the second and the third one. The fourth one, I don't think he appeared in.
I think he directed those too, didn't he? So I think he wrote and directed those. I think he kind of took that series over.
Yeah, he's definitely done. He definitely directed the third one, which unfortunately that's one I haven't had a chance to see that, but that was kind of taking his character from the character from the Never Back Down movies and really making him the lead properly, whereas when he appeared in the second one, it was essentially a rehash of the first one. So he was kind of doing the training and stuff. But then they were like, right, we're going to do a bit like the Boyka thing, we're just going to take that character who was a supporting character and we're going to make him the main character now. And that's high on my list. He made that one in Thailand. It's with getting quite a good cast. You've got Isai Morales in there, and his wife Nathan Jones, who's actually loads of it. Nathan Jones, Brahim Chab, Ron Smorenberg, all great, action performers and stuff. Gigi Yanin's in there, so I've definitely. Tony Jaa apparently turns up.
Right? Wow. Yeah,
I do need to see that one.
It was on Tubi had it for a period here in the US, and it's one of those things with Tubi where it's like I'll see it and I'll put it in my queue and think, okay, I'll get to this when I get to it, and then when I go to get to it, it's gone. So that's sort of how I missed that one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so and then then there were films like Skin Trade was another really good one. Well, with again supporting role, but a good. It's always great to see Michael Jai White as part of an ensemble, like an impressive ensemble, which Skin Trade definitely was, and Triple Threat definitely was. And I think he thrives, in those in those movies where there's a lot of those guys all together. I think that really works well. But we go back. Where did Michael Jai White start? Where did we first see him and stuff? Well, he was kind of out the gate with. Well, not out of the gate because he'd kind of worked his way up by that point, but he kind of landed, the major role of Spawn, playing and actually got to appear as himself, playing Al Simmons in the early scenes before it becomes all makeup and stuff. So that was his big break, and unfortunately, the film itself underperformed. It got bad reviews. It had a lot of problems. Some of the CGI and the story was, the hardcore fan, Spawn is a very, violent, character, comic book character, and the film was kind of neutered. It's like they couldn't, have as much violence and stuff as the hardcore fan base would want, and therefore the film kind of dissatisfied everyone. I still want to go back and check it out again because I like. There's things I like about it that I would want to can. And Michael Jai White is definitely one of those things. I think he did do a really good job playing Al Simmons and Spawn. You know, I think it was good. I'd love it if, you know, if they did like a Spawn DTV sequel or something, and they were able to bring Michael Jai White back. There's absolutely no reason they couldn't do that. With you know, him with, you know, because he does a lot of voiceover work, Michael Jai White. So he could, whether he plays the character physically, which he could definitely do, or whether they just, you know, use his voice or something. I'd love to see that happen again. Maybe have, you know, just have another crack at it, because, you know, we've seen things like Nicolas Cage doing Ghost Rider twice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think basically they messed it up twice, because I don't think people responded as very well to Ghost Rider's the Spirit of Vengeance film very well either. But it was, again, they tried to do a reset on it, and I think it would be interesting if they tried to do that. But yeah, for me, one of my favorite roles of Michael Jai White is Universal Soldier: The Return, where again he was playing the villain, because he often plays heroes, but I do think he, a bit like Scott Adkins, he plays really good heroes, but I think he plays even better villains. And I think when he played the character of Seth, who's basically a body that's got the computer brain that's basically put into the body and becomes, but he's the voice as well. So you get, before he even gets in the body, the computer's talking, and, you know, in that sort of Howl from 2001 kind of way, but it's Michael Jai White's voice and stuff. I like that, and I've got a special fondness in my heart for Universal Soldier: The Return. So yeah, there was kind of that's, I mean, he's got loads of interesting roles. If you see he's turned up all over the place, but his history goes back to even the original Universal Soldier. You know, that's one of the curious things, is Universal Soldier, his character in Universal Soldier: The Return, I don't think is supposed to be the same character from the first film.
Right.
But if you wanted to say that, there's no reason you couldn't, because he was in it. He was in the background. He was like, had a small role, you know, supporting role alongside a few other guys. In that original, he's credited just as Soldier in that one. But yeah, he got upgraded from bit part to lead villain, which is pretty cool. But he goes back to he had little appearances in Toxic Avenger movies, and what do you call it? What's it? I think he appeared in some PM Entertainment stuff at some point. I might be wrong. Oh no, he did do
Lion Strike.
Yeah, he did do Lion Strike. So, I mean, he worked his way up. It always feels like he hasn't been around that long, but, you know, you think, well, he's basically been around. He was around from the start of the 90s or the late 80s, and yeah, he's
well, because he was born in the late. Yeah, he's born in the late 60s, and it's like, I think we forget that, right? Because when we see him in these movies, he looks younger. He's you know, he feels like, for us, you know, watching movies, that, like, okay, you know, Dolph, Van Damme, Seagal, that's kind of like the earlier wave, and that we feel like Michael Jai White should be the next wave, along with, like, you know, Scott Adkins. But actually, no, he's like a good 10 years older than Scott Adkins, or maybe 9, you know, but roughly, you know, that, yeah, he's kind of closer in age to, like, Mark Dacascos and those guys, who are kind of, I guess you could say they're that kind of almost like that hidden generation of stars, you know, Dacascos, Gary Daniels, who, because that first group, the, you know, Van Damme, Seagals, all of them hung on for so long, they that middle tier had to kind of find their own way. Where, you know, we're talking about John Wick, you know, Dacascos had a great role in part 3 with that and that kind of thing. But we kind of, you know, we have such a great generation of stars that were born in that kind of mid to late 60s period that we're just starting to see more of now, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Another role I want to shout out for Michael Jai White. He, you know, unexpectedly, he turns up in The Dark Knight. You know, Christopher Nolan casting him.
Yes.
You know, again, non-action role, but really, you know, he's great screen presence. I mean, Eric Roberts in the same movie. You know, it's like it's like Eric Roberts. He will appear in anything, but, you know, you don't necessarily always get the best performance, but Here we, or was it Batman Begins that Eric Roberts was in? I can't remember
No,
which
no,
one.
no. It was The Dark Knight.
But
Yeah, they were both in The Dark Knight together. Yeah. So, billion-dollar earning film. I think it was the first comic book movie to pass the billion-dollar threshold. And yeah, they were both a part of it. So yeah, it's interesting because you think about that, like like we were talking about with Scott Adkins doing some of those movies. It's interesting, these stars that we love in these DTV movies. They also found their way into some of these other movies just because of their athleticism and action prowess. Even
mm,
though, like you said, it wasn't an action film for him there, but it is always kind of fun. It's always fun for, I think, for us to see them show up in some of these movies.
yeah, yeah, that's definitely.
Well, so actually, this is an interesting dovetail as we start to look at one more. Actually, before we look at One More Shot, the first movie, One Shot, right? I think
Mm.
think about when that movie came out. Obviously it had, I don't know if gimmick is the right term, right? It had the film, like right, the
Concept.
concept of just the entire movie. I don't think it wasn't done in one shot. It was just sort of edited to look like one shot. Because I feel like that would
Yes.
take a lot to just
I
get
think it's basically impossible to
right.
even the long
Exactly.
even the shortest
Right.
one shot scene, which they've become quite common now with like Extraction, Sam Hargrave doing them in Extraction and stuff. I think there are hidden cuts and stuff. Actually, you go back to John Hyams, the beginning of the Universal Soldier, um, not Day of Reckoning. What's it called? Regeneration.
Generation.
The
Yeah.
the whole opening shot of Regeneration. I think that might have been a complete one shot. But yeah, the idea was that James Nunn wanted to do a film that was one single shot from beginning to end, or at least looked that way. And it's hard, I think that was, it's not, that's not the first time that's been done. There's been various other examples. Actually, there was a very low budget film that was made. I don't think it ever found distribution, but I got a screener disc of a film called Uncut, which was made in and around a theater. It was a horror movie, and that was all designed to be just sort of free flowing around the following characters around the building, and then other characters would interject, and everyone had to be, you know, everyone has to come in on their marks, basically, and if you get it wrong, you got to basically start it all over again and
Yeah.
stuff. And that would be I'm sure they had their fair amount of that here with one shot, but I think they judge it of saying, okay, between this point and this point, this is where we're going to try and make one single shot. Stay on your marks and whatever, and then cut that, take a break. It's like, but there's there was, what was the other? Tak Sakaguchi did one, which I think might have possibly been. Again, it's hard to say sometimes, but I think it was oh god, one versus. I think it's got different titles like One versus 1,000 and stuff like that. But it's basically a long, extended. It's basically an hour and 15 minute sort of fight scene or collection of fight scenes, and it goes from one to, and that was a similar idea or the same idea, but not a lot of repetition of what was going on. Whereas with one shot, the idea was we're not just going to try and do a single tracking shot around following these characters. We're actually going to take them from one environment into another environment, through another environment. We're going to put in some gunplay. We're going to put in some hand-to-hand combat and stuff, and they're just going to, and as well as exposition, dialogue scenes, dramatic moments and stuff like that, and just going to try and do the whole thing, which I think was I don't, especially on the budget, it's like I don't think that kind of ambition is it's hard to realize in the DTV sphere. A lot of people a lot of the films kind of do template, try and do it as straightforward, quick as you can, not too much action because it's too intensive on the budget. Don't add in the explosions and stuff. And they were like, no, we want to do that. We want to do it as hard. We want to do the hardest thing we could possibly do with the very limited money that our kind financiers are gonna give us, and see if it pays off. And One Shot really did.
Yeah. Now, so thinking about that one shot, I mean, I think with that idea of it all being done in one shot, yeah, what was your feeling when you saw that movie, and how Nunn used the one shot format?
Yeah, I thought it worked really well. The film takes place on an island setting, so it's quite isolated, and the very limited locations, a lot of it's outside. It's all shot basically all daytime, and the there's a few on location, interiors, offices, and so a couple of corridors and stuff that they're able to move around. And I thought, it starts off on a helicopter before they land, so we get a scene on the helicopter, and then it transitions onto the island location, and that's where we stay for the rest of the film. And the transitions are all seamlessly done. All the camera work's fantastic. The film is also really strong in some of its casting. I mean, there's a guy called Jess. I'm probably going to get his name wrong, which I apologize. Jess Loudon, or Loudlin, who's
Oh,
a
yes, yeah.
French mixed martial artist, who at is it last year? Might have been last year. The Fighting Spirit Film Festival over here. I went there, and Jess was it wasn't on the building. I didn't know he was going to be there until we saw the program when we got there. But yeah, he came on, and they did an interview with him and stuff. And he kind of was sort of around, to say hello to, and I got to have a little chat with him. He did a really interesting film called Night Fair, which is like basically a horror movie, but with a really crazy kind of it's kind of a slasher movie where he's like this taxi driver who's essentially chasing after kids, but there's more to it, and it kind of goes in a weird. You get to the end of the film, and it's like there's almost a mythology around it. It's a curious film. It's quite short. It's well worth seeing. But Jess didn't have any dialogue in that film. It was kind of like he's just playing this menacing character. But in one shot, and I watched it again today, I realized what a complex, sort of demanding kind of role he had there. And he's kind of, I've never seen him before, really. I don't think, when I saw him in this, and I thought, oh, at the time I was like, oh, this guy's good. He's quite good. And I go back and watch it now, and I think there's some subtle nuances and stuff that show, that although he's a fierce, physical kind of guy, he does have some acting, skills that are really in play here. There's some nice scenes where he's not just shouting orders and stuff, but he's speaking to one of his guys who's going to be he needs him to be a suicide bomber, basically. And this guy's kind of, oh yeah, I'm going to do it for the great, get my rewards in the afterlife and all this sort of stuff. And there's a moment where and this, where the camera is kind of looking at, lingers on Jess's face, sort of separates him, frames him separate from what's happening. And you just see a moment. He's the villain, he's the bad guy, but you see a moment of, pause or regret that that he's doing something with this guy that he just, what the guy's saying to him, and he's kind of, oh yeah, you got to do this kind of thing, and he just doesn't believe any of it. He's just, and there's a moment, I feel, that you see that he doesn't like that he's doing that. He feels he got to do it, and he's gonna do it, to meet his objective. But there's a hint of something there, which I think other actions, action actors or action villains or whatever, they just wouldn't do that with. And I think Jess was able to sell that very brief moment really well. It really stuck with me, and that whole sequence, which is kind of this journey of this naive martyr. He thinks he's going to be a martyr. So they spend quite a lot of time with those characters, because we come away from Scott Adkins and his team, and then they're getting their scene ready and getting all ready for the camera to come back over to them. so they're having a break and getting things together. So we spend several minutes with the villains. And again, I think the film is quite interesting in that you're moving between these two sets of characters, and you're probably spending a bit more time with the villains here than you otherwise might have. They probably would have cut in and out quite quickly from them, and you wouldn't actually, like going back to like sudden death or something. They cut to the box. Powers Booth says something villainous. They cut back. Kind of they're talking on the walkie-talkies or saying, "Where's the guy?" or this sort of stuff. They could have been doing that, but here they sort of the film slows down, and you actually follow the villains of the story for several minutes, and I think that's one of the things that really stood out to me, as well as the execution of the concept of the one shot, because I think once you're watching it, you forget about it. If it's doing its job, you're not noticing it and you don't think about it. So the story has to be strong. You have to be focusing on the story, or the moment the action beats when they kick in, you have to be really sort of drawn into those and that. But it's only occasionally, I think, that you'll go, "Oh, yeah, they're not cutting, are they?" It's like it's something that you don't, because you're drawn in. You're in the you're already in the movie, and it's just playing out, and you're into the story. So therefore, the one take idea is kind of, it's there, but you're not. If it's doing its job, it's not drawing attention to itself. Whereas something like in the 1980s movie, when they did 3D movies, they were like, they had to keep reminding you that you're watching a 3D movie by pointing something at you or something, to go, "Look, don't forget you're watching a 3D movie," and stuff. And that actually, even recently, when the 3D revival, which is, you don't see many films released in 3D. It does happen, but they're not doing many conversions or shot for 3D movies, as a side note. But the whole 3D thing, they were kind of really selling that as a novelty, get people in the cinemas, and remind them, you've got to look, you're watching it in 3D. How good is this, kind of thing? But if the film's doing its job, it doesn't need to be in 3D. And actually, I would prefer not. It doesn't need to. Concept. Whereas the one shot concept is a great one, but the film doesn't lean on it too much. It's not drawing attention to itself. So it's a great experiment, and that really works really well. But the film itself stands alone. I think if it had been shot traditionally with multiple cuts and everything, I think it would have been just as good. But I do think they did a really, I do think that the execution of it was really good, and other people have tried. I mean, Sam Mendes did it for the opening of Spectre, and then he went off and did his 1917 movie, which much bigger budget, period war, kind of thing, doing the same kind of one-shot concept, and getting all the critical plaudits and stuff. But then One Shot is, a little DTV movie that barely gets any, promotion, and I would say, had probably a tougher job, because they didn't have the millions and millions that Sam Mendes or whatever had. But that, maybe that's me talking, out of hand, because maybe both, whether it's a big budget movie or a low budget movie, they probably both got their own challenges. But I think James Nunn and the team really did a fantastic job with One Shot. How did you feel about it when you saw it?
So, initially I had this sense of, like, I felt like Nunn hamstrung himself with the one-shot device. I likened it in my review to I think there was a French author who wrote an entire novel about using the letter E, and so it felt like he was kind of almost doing that on purpose. But I think further looking at it again, and sort of in us discussing it here and just sort of thinking about it, I think there, like you said, the story unfolds in a way that I think really works. It's nice. I take for granted, I think, sometimes, that, like, if for example Ryan Phillippe's character is saying something obnoxious, we get a cut to Scott Adkins rolling his eyes, right? And we just have to take the eye roll for granted, or hope it happens. But I think to your point about the performances, obviously Atkins and Philippi, they kind of give you what you want from Atkins and Philippi. But like you said, Jess, yeah, I was trying to think of how to say his name, Liaudin, maybe. I'm not sure. He turns in a good performance. This might be my favorite Ashley Greene performance. I think, I think she's really great there as well. And her character really anchors the film too. So I think to your point, like when you get these really great performances by the cast and the story is unfolding the way you want it to, you kind of forget that it's flowing in this one shot fashion. And then the way it flows in that one shot fashion, it's almost like watching an episode of like The West Wing or something like that, where like people are walking and it's like one character walks in and then another character walks away, and we follow the character who walks away. It kind of flows in that organic way. So it's an interesting movie. And I think I would have thought, okay, he got it out of his system, right? Nunn. He made this one. He did, the technique that he wanted to, got it out of his system, and that's it. But no, he did a sequel, right? He did a second movie for the most part using the technique, right? Like at the very beginning, he doesn't use it, but after the moment Scott Adkins enters the movie, it's all in the technique.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, because I wanted to watch the first one, so because I know the second one picks up basically directly after the first one, and I wanted, because it's been a few years, um, I wanted to re-establish that context and see that continuity, and how well does that continuity work with the 2 year break, and what are the differences that we notice between the first film and the second. And I think the differences are there's a few differences that become quite apparent quite quick. The first thing is that One More Shot, like you say, it opens with a very traditionally edited scene. It's got point of view sort of camera, body cam kind of stuff, but it is typically edited. But it then transpires that is on a TV screen that they're watching, so that's how they kind of work it in. But the film itself, yeah, the first one did well enough, so he wanted to continue, wanted to do another story, but he wants to up his game, he wants to take it to the next level, and I think you definitely see that here, in that he's tried to differentiate it in a number of ways. One is that whereas the first film was a daytime shoot, which is quite straightforward for filmmaking, he's made this one an entirely nighttime shoot. So it's all set. The whole film is set at night, which brings in a whole load of other considerations. He's also gone from a very deserted location, so basically an old army. Like, both films are not set in the UK, but were shot in the UK. So the first film was shot in an old army base that was pretending to be an island, a Polish island, but it was, say, an old army base which didn't have much on it. It was quite a sparse location. This is they've relocated it to an airport, but it's not like an airport set. It's a working. It's not even a closed down airport. It is a working airport. One of the not biggest or busiest, but certainly one with one of the most well known and regularly used in the UK. Lots of planes in and out of it every day. So they've gone to a working airport. So they've got to work around a location. So even though they've gone to a busy location, that's one thing. They can control. They shoot it and they at night, so they don't have to worry. They can control the what extras are around, whatever. But you've still got all those other considerations. You've got the other considerations of shooting on a location. Being an airport, the security is particularly tight. So they've got, and they're making an action movie now. I was reading an article about it earlier. They say they're bringing, okay, they're fake guns and stuff, right, but they're taking guns into an air and not just into the airport, but into like the main terminals and the bits behind the the bits you don't see, the parts of the building that are where the luggage transports and all that sort of stuff. They've got to go and shoot in all these different places. So they basically had to do security checks on everybody, not just the cast, like everybody who went in. You've got to do these security checks on them before they can film there for a few hours, and then they've got to come back and do it again and stuff. I don't know how many nights they shot there, but that's some challenging stuff what they did there. So, and then on top of that, you've got to try and do the same one-shot concept and make that work again. So I think, yeah, the fact that he's added that, differentiated it visually by giving it this nighttime, it's got this nighttime look, and the location's fantastic. I mean, it's supposed to be Baltimore, but you must have recognized that it's not an American airport, I presume.
Well, I've actually been to that Baltimore airport, so Baltimore Washington International Airport, because yeah, some of the smaller airlines they switch planes out of that one as opposed to the two big Washington. Because Baltimore's the city that's like near Washington D.C., so it's about hour and a half, or it's about 2 hours maybe south of where I live. So it goes Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, but Baltimore's closer to Washington than it is Philadelphia. So yeah, so I recognize the airport, but I also,
and
like
the signage, the signage must be different over there. Did it look like
it didn't?
Because I would look at it. Didn't. Okay.
Yeah, so there were moments where it did, where there's some things that I can't think off the top of my head, but yeah, it was one of those things where initially I thought maybe this could be Baltimore, Washington, and then as I kind of watched it, I was like, okay, they're not doing that here, but it's interesting, for as many differences as there are between international airports, there's so many similarities as well, and so in that sense, he could kind of pull it off by moving, shooting the film there.
Yeah, well, that's great. That means it works. I mean, for me, it's like I would have just thought, I've flown out. That's so I think I might have said Stansted Airport is the airport, and that's the one I've probably most frequently flown out of. They do the budget airline kind of flights out of there, and so I've gone through it. It's not like some of the bigger airports, but it's got some character. It's got its own sort of style and stuff. And I just like, from somebody who's been there to see, you get to, so, I can recognize that signage, or I recognize that bit of the thing. And then, but the most exciting part is when they put what they call what's referred to as the track transit system, which is basically the driverless train, which transports passengers to some of the gates.
Oh yes.
And they incorporate that into the film as well, and they shot and they did a fight scene on the transit, which going back to what we were talking about, Eliminators with James Nunn, there's a cable car that runs across the Thames, the River Thames in London here, and they shot a fight scene on that cable car for that film, which was great to see, because that's another great location. I love that cable car. It's great. And yeah, having used this transit system, I just got I love trains and stuff in general, but I got a real kick out of seeing Scott Adkins do a fight scene on it, which apparently they did do at speed. The transit was actually moving apparently when they were shooting it, and it's only a couple of minute sequence, but it was great to see. And so I think the location brings so much. I mean, there's bits where they go down into the sort of industrial parts of the, where it's, because up on the up where the terminals are and the waiting areas and stuff, it's all very open, and it's just seats and signs and stuff. But when you get down into the belly of the airport, it's machinery, and there's boxes around, and there's some visually, it's really interesting. There's so much for the eye to focus on, whereas in the original one shot they didn't have that. It was just very basic. They kept it very simple, whereas the all the stuff in the shots and stuff is so much more involved. I mean, they've even got a plane. They actually go outside, and there's a plane there that they use, and there's some of the vehicles that are around. There's some driving shots. There's a bit that reminded me of Children of Men, where they're kind of traveling in the car. I know a lot of other people have done it as well, But again, he was sort of he was really trying to take it to the next level. And for me, the one, I don't know if it's a negative, but because I think it is good. But as soon as the film starts, I think 24.
Yeah.
This film feels like a feature-length episode of 24, whereas I think the original one shot almost, because it didn't have any visual familiar, there was nothing visually familiar about the first film, whereas the second one, even from the start, they kind of do the screens and stuff, and although they don't do any split screen devices or anything in this, I was thinking the aesthetic very much reminded me of one of Jack Bauer's adventures and stuff. So, which I love, because I do like 24, but it just took a little bit away in that it felt like something else rather than being its own thing a little bit. But I do think it was still executed brilliantly, and the cast, they upped the level, they upped the game with the cast, because we got Tom Berenger on board, we got Michael Jai White in there, and that. So yeah, I think they've. Oh, and Aaron Toney is the guy who, great stunt guy who Scott fights twice. He fights him on the transit, then he fights him again a couple of minutes later. Actually, they have quite a good fight scene, and yeah. So I think for those people, you don't have to see one shot to watch one more shot, but I think it does help, and it's very interesting to watch the two together. But I think definitely the experiment of the experimental nature of or the ambitious nature of James Nunn in saying, I don't want to do exactly what I did before. I want to try and do I want to try and take it to take it to the next level. What can we do to make this different to the first one? Which conceptually it could be the exact same thing all over again, because at its heart there's one guy who Scott Adkins has got to protect, with the help of a number of other people, and the bad guys are coming after him. There's attrition on both sides, and we're ultimately left with a couple of people. So the exact same thing happens in the second film, almost to the point of me thinking, is it really worth it for this one guy? But but they do, and then they add a bit of drama, and there's a bit more drama. Scott Adkins' character gets a little bit more fleshed out. He's very much just the action guy in the first one. In this one, they reveal that he's got a family. He has a very brief phone call with his partner, and they mention kids and stuff. And so at least you get a bit more of an insight into who his character is. So yeah, I think on that. So I think for all those reasons, One More Shot really does stand apart from One Shot, and I think although it does have that feeling of being a derivative for 24, I do think it's better than the first one. I prefer it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I like this one better than the first one. One of the things that's interesting about this one is that you could say the first one was in the Die Hard vein, but it was a little bit different in the sense that Scott Adkins' character is coming to this island to do a job, right? He's expected to do a job. Whereas this one really has the Die Hard feel, because he drops off, Mansoor from the previous movie. He drops him off. He's in the airport. He's getting ready to leave. He's talking to his wife. He's getting ready to go home. He's telling her he's going to go home. And then he sees two suspicious guys walk past. And there's almost a moment too where he has to think about it. But actually, I don't want to say he thinks about it. I think it's almost like he knows. Like, I've got to deal with this. I can't let this happen.
Yeah.
And so he does. And then we just kind of know. And of course, there's a point where they try to escape with Mansoor, and they get blocked by the mercenaries that are led by Michael Jai White and some other ones. The other thing I think about this one that I liked better than the previous one is that the previous one had like this clown car aspect to it, where it's like one truck is supposed to be bringing all of these bad guys. That it's just like they seem to be coming out of nowhere. It's like maybe like there's spawning asexually through sporing or something like that. That we suddenly have all these bad guys. Whereas here it was a little bit more organic that we would have this sort of this mercenary army led by Michael Jai White, and then there's of course there's somebody on the inside. Who is it that Adkins can't trust? And then the other piece, we talked about what a great baddie, from the previous one, Jess Loudon played. He was a revelation as a baddie, whereas Michael Jai White, we're expecting great baddie from him, and he delivers it. He delivers the baddie you would want. And I was reading what Bulletproof said. Chad Cruz from Bulletproof covered this movie. It was the only one out of the ones that I recognize, at least, that had covered this on that's on IMDb's critic reviews. And he was saying that Michael Jai White makes a great baddie. I think kind of in this, he didn't necessarily say Matthias Hughes, but I think it's similar to Matthias Hughes, where he's larger than life, and as a hero, it's kind of almost like in the same, like almost like a Dolph Lundgren way, where you've got to really create a scenario around him where he would, he has to overcome odds. Because if you see Michael Jai White in a room full of baddies, right, he's usually like a foot taller than all of them and probably like a good 50 pounds heavier, right? So you're just like, how are these people going to beat him? But here it's great because it's like, okay, how is Scott Adkins going to defeat Michael Jai White as the bad guy? But he also just delivers this sort of cold, calculating mercenary leader baddie that I think is a really great like contrast to Scott Adkins. And then, like you said, we get people like Aaron Toney, who play, some of the mercenaries, and they make for really fantastic fight scenes with Scott Adkins. So yeah, I think if James Nunn felt like he needed to make another one of these movies, this definitely felt like a step up for sure.
Yeah, and I think by the time you get to the end of this one, it does feel like the story has got another chapter that they want to tell, because although they could have put a cap on it on this one, but I think they intentionally don't. They kind of leave it for a break, and I think that the way I felt about it at the end of it was I think James wants to make it a trilogy. I think they're going to do maybe like a time jump one, maybe not continue like straight on the same night, but maybe like not a massive amount of time, but they'll sort of follow the character, pick up again, maybe after he's had a night's rest or something, and do the final part of the story. But there's also the villains are interesting on this, because we've got, say, Michael Jai White, but then there's another villain who gets revealed who ends up being sort of more the main villain. And I think when we discussed it on the DTV Digest, we were kind of a bit divided on how we felt about that character and that performance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we want to talk about.
Yeah, I didn't give the spoiler warning, but maybe we'll give everybody a good like 15 to 20 seconds to know that, like, yeah, my hunch is that people listening to this have probably already seen it because it's been out for a little bit. But yeah, just to give you a sense, we're going to probably spoil who the inside person is. So if you don't want to hear, I would stop it here, watch the movie, and come back to where we are here. So yeah, you've been warned at this point. So so we can go from here.
Yeah, so when the agent, who is, I'm trying to remember what
Alexis
her name.
Knapp, I think is the actress.
Yeah. So she's basically the mole. She's the inside person or whatever, and she's kind of coordinating it and running it for again. This is where I'd say the third part thing sort of comes in, because she's working for somebody, but we don't know who that is when she speaks to them on the phone. They're using a voice changer and stuff like that. So there's potential for that person to become the villain of the next one. But anyway, so they reveal her, and I didn't have a problem with that, and I thought that all worked okay. But I think maybe on a second viewing, that I was thinking, yeah, she's not quite convincing enough. As maybe they needed somebody a bit. Because she's quite young and stuff, and I don't know if that was what was not working for me this time. Was she didn't seem that, she was kind of being threatening, but was she convincingly threatening in terms of like a major villain role. I'm not entirely sure. I think she was fine. I think, you know, she was doing a good job, but you know, compared to some of the other actors, you know, in the film, I don't think she had the experience to really sell, especially as she's supposed to be basically Michael Jai White's boss, or, you know, partner or whatever. She's sort of telling him to go and do stuff or whatever. And I felt like she's, I don't know. It's I wasn't that convinced this time. I thought she was fine, but it was almost like she reminded me of Christina Loken in Terminator 3,
Mm.
where she's fine. I mean, in that one she's supposed to be kind of robotic, but in this one she was quite robotic, but not in you know, she's not playing a robot. She's supposed to, and and it was just like the casting didn't seem didn't quite work. I think I had no problem with the idea of the character and what she was doing and stuff, but I just wasn't filing that I believed in the performance as much. So for that reason, I think Jess, you know, all-encompassing villain role in the first one for me was better than this kind of double act that we ended up with this one. We do get a Michael Jai White fight scene, which is good. I can't remember what they did with her. Did they do a fight scene with her? I'd say I didn't find her that memorable, unfortunately.
It was in the airplane. It was in the airplane
Right.
after.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like
Yeah.
she's about to take off and leave, and he gets there to the airplane. So, yeah, you know what I think the better comparison is when you look at the previous film with Ashley Greene's performance. They're
Yeah.
technically the same age. I mean, you know, Ashley Greene's 2 years older than Alexis Knapp, but of course, this movie was made, you know, a few years. You know, they're made a few years apart, so they're roughly the same age. And I don't know how you felt, but I felt like Ashley Greene was more believable in her part as the agent who's coming to interrogate Mansour than Lomax, that Alexis Knapp felt as this Lomax character who's the one on the inside. And maybe that's part of it too. And I guess if you see these back to back, you really have that juxtaposition where you're like, wow, you know, this character does feel out of place here. Because I definitely agreed with you on that.
Yeah, because I'm looking up her pic. I mean, she just looks so young.
Yeah.
I'm, you know, the fact that she's supposed. I mean, she is 35,
Yeah.
but she's supposed to have reached this position. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's I don't know. Maybe it's a sexism thing because we're kind of used to seeing that with male characters, and maybe he's, you know, maybe, you know, being so young and fresh faced and whatever wouldn't. I mean, it's not just the fact that she's young and fresh faced. There's just something about the way she vocalizes and speaks and stuff. She's just not.
But
She's not
you know,
particularly. She just wasn't threatening enough. I think, you know. So I'm trying to think of a really good somebody to compare her to.
well, I think
Because
like
there's
Ashley Greene. I think you look at how
yeah,
Ashley Greene performed in that previous movie. Yeah, because I know you're saying like you don't want to sound sexist, you don't want to come off sexist, but I think that's the things that if Ashley Greene nailed it in the previous movie, at least I felt she did. She was more believable despite being the same age as Alexis Knapp's character, being, you know, female as well. That, you know, she nails that part, and I think Knapp, like you said, I think this happens a lot with the Randall Emmett movies where people get thrust into roles that they don't really. It doesn't necessarily work for them, but it's more like we just need to get the name on the tin, and that's more the concern. So you see, like, you know, you see someone like Donna D'Errico or somebody like that, where you're just like, this person doesn't fit in this movie, right? Like but it's a name on the cover. I'm not saying that Alexis Knapp is necessarily a name, but it felt like she was put into a part that didn't fit. I mean, you know, Hannah Arterton, you know, she has a very small role in this. So another spoiler alert, that she's her character doesn't last that long in the movie, but she also pulls it off a little bit better, right? Like she's more believable as well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe because it's opposite Tom Berenger, and you know, the twist is supposed to be that we think Berenger, or the plot is leading us down this road that we think Berenger is the mole, and when we find out it isn't, maybe that's part of it too. Is that we we've been sold this one thing, and so now when Alexis Knapp's character is suddenly the one who was the mole, and it's not Berenger, maybe we have to shift gears so much, and she's not giving us that gear shift enough. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. I was just trying to think of like actresses in the Bond films and stuff where
Mhm.
where some of them they've had to go. They're either going full villain or they're somebody who's like this where they're supposed to be an ally and then they turn out to be a villain. So somebody like Sophie Marceau when she was in The World Is Not Enough, she has to be she 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 becomes the villain of the story, in a similar fashion actually, because you got uh, in that film, it's Robert Carlyle, mentioning him again. Robert Carlyle was the villain, but then they did the twist of revealing that you know this younger woman is actually the main villain. Actually, I just thought they basically did the same thing with The Dark Knight Rises.
Right.
Do you remember? Do you get what I'm talking about? With the world
Oh,
is not enough and
well, it was,
Dark Knight Rises. Do you remember the twist
yes,
at the end
right,
of the
with
Dark Knight Rises?
it's Marion Cotillard, right?
Yeah, yeah. So they basically
Okay.
do the same thing, and they're
Right,
both French.
right. They're both right. Well,
and the,
and
and, the, and the villain guys are both English. just
right.
just struck by the similarity there
Well,
between those two films.
and
But
also going back to Alexis Knapp, Sophie
yeah.
Marceau was the same age roughly as Alexis Knapp when she made The World Is Not Enough.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, that would make sense.
yeah, so again, you're going back to that idea that like I think it's just a strictly Alexis Knapp doesn't quite fit. Like I don't think it's hasn't much like we've seen it done well or we've seen it work. We've got all these different examples of it working, but for
Well,
whatever
Famke
reason, like
Janssen would be somebody like
yes,
Famke Janssen who can project villain, quite
hmm
well. I think somebody who had that kind of. I don't know whether. I don't know. It's hard to think. I can't. I do think that. Yeah, I thought she did a good job. I did think she did a good job, but I just on a second watch, I just
but
wasn't overly struck with her as I just felt that she didn't have she didn't have enough convincing age and experience to have to be coordinating this massive effort. Whereas somebody it felt like if it had been Tom Berenger or you know somebody somebody just a bit, if they'd cast it a bit older, maybe I probably wouldn't have had a problem with it. Somebody again, it's not just the age thing, it's also just the sort of the actor's sort of experience, I think. So that was say I don't want to be I feel like I'm being really down on her, but I'd say that's not my intention at all. I did think she had a great presence, and she did do a good job, and it's a nice twist in the story. um, but it did detract a little bit for me from Michael Jai White, and I would have liked the film to probably have just had a little bit more focus on Michael Jai White. Maybe because you go back to coming back to Sudden Death again. They do the reveal of the guy who's the ally on the outside is actually working with Powers Booth,
yeah,
and they have to have a confrontation. Well, his scenes, because his part is quite short, and the focus never comes off Powers Booth. Powers Booth is the villain all the way through. And I think with this, they could have done a similar thing where they spend some time with their character, they reveal her and they show her motivations and whatever, but then they say no, they maybe dispatch her or something, and then it's back to focusing on Michael Jai White. So I think yeah, I would have liked more Michael Jai White. Is the takeaway there? I think.
do you think maybe this is the thing? I wonder if Michael Jai White wasn't available as much. Maybe that was what it was, and maybe that they had to do this to split the difference. Maybe he was, he could be in England for a short period and then needed to be somewhere else, and maybe that was the way that they split the difference with his character, so he could still be there. Because to your point, he should have been the Jess Liauden of this movie, and he doesn't quite get enough to be able to do it, like you said, because the Alexis Knapp character detracts too much from it.
Yeah, but again, I think that was probably a conscious choice when they were making it. As much as anything, maybe they were writing around the fact that they didn't have him, but also I think, like we say, they didn't want to repeat themselves. They wanted, okay, they've got the central concept and everything is the same, but we're going to make some changes. So one of the changes was, okay, we've got this big bad guy, big male bad guy. Oh, now the twist is going to be, that there's a secondary villain who's this young woman you probably wouldn't have suspected, and that's going to be another sort of twist that differentiates it from the first one. So I think that's what they were trying to do there. Although, so for me, I would have preferred the Michael Jai White character stay the focus.
Yeah, but like you said, the action is so fantastic in this, and I think that's the area where, like you said, the action was fantastic in the first one. I mean, I think it's the other thing too, maybe about this movie that I might have been a little bit tougher on the first one, but I think seeing a lot of what's out there for direct-to-video action. I think of a couple names like Jesse V. Johnson, who we've mentioned, Isaac Florentine, who we've mentioned. Nunn, I think, is in that conversation. Doesn't have the filmography that those two have, but at least in terms of putting out direct-to-video action that has a much higher floor than we seem to be getting a lot lately. I know you guys at DTV Digest, you guys do a lot of those. You'll do like 3 or 4 in an episode, and obviously Ty and I, we've been kind of digging into the bottoms of Tubi and Hulu for some of these. It's nice to see a DTV director who's putting out stuff again. Somebody that, in addition to Johnson and Florentine, to have another name that we can hang our hats on.
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. And speaking of the action, so the fights in this were choreographed by Tim Mann, who Scott Adkins has worked with a lot, and the other stunts and stuff were done by a guy called Dan Stiles, who is also really good. Again, going back to the Foot Soldier films, he does a lot of work on those, and loads of other stuff. Has been around quite a while. Somebody else who I've been fortunate enough to have a brief meet with at this Fighting Spirit Film Festival. Got to say hello to him. You wouldn't realize, I mean, he's quite a young guy, so you wouldn't expect he's got, but he's been doing these films for ages. So yeah, it's funny that just mentioned the Fighting Spirit. One More Shot, actually, it's just this past weekend actually over here. One More Shot had a theatrical screening at the latest Fighting Spirit Film Festival, which was the 9th. And James Nunn was actually there. I didn't get a chance to go. Mike from the DTV Digest and I usually go every year if we can to this festival, but we didn't get a chance to go this year. But the One More Shot was playing on the big screen. I'm sure that went down really well, and it's a great fit. If anybody ever gets to, if anybody's in London at the time, whatever, or a listener, if you're a listener in the UK or whatever, and you can get to London, the Fighting Spirit Film Festival, I would always recommend. They generally have a really good lineup of films. They do a lot of focusing on short films, and there's a lot of really great stuff. You tend to, they have people. Sorry about this little sidetrack. I just want to mention it, but it's a really great little event, and there's always a chance to meet these people. That's what kind of the point I'm trying to get. I met Scott Adkins there. I met Jess there. I met, I got to say hi to people like Dan Stiles there. It's if I'd have gone this weekend, I could have met Neil Marshall, director of Dog Soldiers, and his most recent film Duchess, which was also showing there. So some people, you have to go to these conventions and stuff to get a chance to meet people. Whereas if you go to a festival like this, they're just there and you can say hello, which is brilliant. So I do recommend fans of action and martial arts stuff to keep an eye on Fighting Spirit Film Festival if they can for next year. It will be their 10th, so I'm sure it'll be a good one. So just an aside, unfortunately I couldn't get there this year, but it's a good one, and it would have been great to see one more shot on the big screen. And some of these questions that we've got that we've had today, we could have posed them to James Nunn himself, because he was doing, say, a Q&A after the film, which I'm sure was really good, and it might actually turn up on the Fighting Spirit YouTube channel at some point. So which because they do tend to put these, they record their interviews on stage, and they do tend to put them on the thing. So I'll be keeping an eye out for that, and giving that a watch if it comes on. So One More Shot, a great pair of films. I'm interested to see what he does next. Would he? I would think it would be called One Last Shot, and and that you know the scale's going to have to be even bigger. So it'll probably be a much more expansive story, limiting you know, not just, you know, they'll probably have one location, but maybe like one bigger location, maybe like a. Do you remember The Taking of Beverly Hills?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
long
with
time ago, long, yeah,
Ken Wall and Matt Frewer.
yeah.
But you know, that was basically Die Hard in Beverly Hills, kind of was the setup, and it was a, you know, it was all cordoned off, but there were lots of different buildings that they could go to and stuff. And so I could imagine that a one more shot could do something like, sorry, a one last shot, or whatever it ends up being called, if they do it, because the story here seems very uh, uh, inconclusive. You know, it's like they don't wrap it up. There's, you know, they've managed to stop, you know, certain things happening, or certain elements of it, but I think danger is still very clear and present. Uh, Funnily enough, one of the recommendations that was coming up, speaking of clear and present danger, was the Sum of All Fears.
Oh,
Because do you remember that film? That's actually Baltimore gets blown up at the beginning of the movie.
right,
Uh,
right, exactly.
I don't know if that was a touchstone, but I definitely think, you go back to Die Hard, I definitely think Die Hard 2 was an influence on this.
Yeah.
I'm sure he had that as a seed in the back of his mind. Okay, we're doing the same thing again. Let's make it an airport setting, you know, kind of the thing. Is like you know, there's not a lot of, you know, he doesn't retread, you know, much of the stuff that's in Die Hard 2. It would actually probably make a good film, you know, to watch side by side. But yeah, I definitely think there's an element of there's a definite element of Die Hard 2. One shot 2, more shooting, whatever. You know, I don't
Right,
know. That was a bad idea. Die Hard 2, Die Harder. What a title! I mean,
right, right. What? Yeah,
it's like
more
one of the
shooting.
best titles ever.
Right, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and you know, just going back to what you mentioned about Tim Mann and Dan Stiles. I mean, they, if you look at you look at their filmographies kind of side by side, you see kind of a you know, a I don't know who's who, or you know, it's like it's a list of pretty much the best DTV action of the past like 10, 15 years. The two of them have
Absolutely,
been
yeah.
in on it. And of course, you know, Scott Adkins' name comes up a lot in these movies too, because he's kind of doing, you know, but you know, the directors that you think about, you know, especially Jesse V. Johnson, they work with him. You know, they work with I mean, they did the hard was Tim Mann was fight choreographer for The Hard Way, so he's also worked with Michael Jai White. So you know, these two names, I think you put these two names with James Nunn, I think you're going to get something that is, you know, I'm excited to see what this third movie is going to be like. But I have a feeling that if you're going to put those three together with Scott Adkins for a third movie, they're going to make sure it's better than this one. I think they're going to,
Oh yeah.
you know, and I'm excited to see what it is. I agree with you. I think this one, it took me a little bit longer than it should have for me to watch it. I think everybody else had kind of watched it before me. I think you guys covered it right on the digest, and I think I remember you guys discussing it. You know, because Bulletproof had already covered it, and so I when I watched it for this, it was kind of like, you know, discussing, you know, having you on. It was like, okay, let's figure out, you know, like it'll make me watch one more shot, because I've been meaning to do it for a while, and I definitely wasn't disappointed.
No, I'm glad. Have you seen many of James Nunn's other films? Because I've mentioned a couple of the Scott Adkins ones that he's done, but he's also done a couple of Marine
So I
DTV
haven't seen those
sequels.
Marine ones. No. So I've only seen, when I look at his filmography, I've only seen for him as a director, it's the Scott Adkins one. So
Mm.
it's the two, you know, one shot, one more shot, and Eliminators. I haven't even seen Green Street 3. I've got to see that one. And so I was trying to think if, you know, like with his second unit stuff, I've seen some of those, like you know, Strippers versus Werewolves, right? The Jonathan Southcott produced with
Oh
Martin
yeah.
Kemp. I think it also had uh, I think it might have had Billy Murray as well, Strippers versus Werewolves. So I've seen some of that kind of stuff, some of his, you know, his second unit or his second assistant director, that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
not enough of his actual directed films.
No, well, definitely. Say I've seen, Shark Bait is a bit of a non-action one. He mostly does action, but he did a shark movie, which is basically a bunch of young people stuck on a jet ski in the middle of the water or whatever. That was quite a decent little film, and yeah, I haven't had a chance to. Although I'm a fan of his work, I haven't actually seen his first proper feature, which was Tower Block, which is supposed to be good, and say Marine 5 and Marine 6. I do really want to see them. I just haven't had a. They have. I'll be honest. I watch most things on free streaming services, so I think one of the Marine films is now on Netflix, so I'm going to try and catch it there. But the other one hasn't been on Prime or anything yet, so I haven't I've tried. So Marine 5 Battleground and Marine 6 Close Quarters, both of which were with the Miz. I actually haven't seen any of the Miz's Marine films. I've only seen the first two, and the Miz came in on the third film, I think.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah,
I've only seen 1 and 2. I haven't seen from 3 on. Yeah, because the Miz, he got his start on the Real World reality show here in America. But apparently, he also there's a huge riot at the Woodstock Festival in 1999, and I guess he was like caught on film as one of the rioters before he became famous wrestler, because his wrestling career took off from being on the Real World. But I think that's part of it. I think the yeah, exactly. So, but I think the WWE owns the Marine franchise, and so they cast wrestlers in the lead. But it seems like the Miz is the one that they've been working with since part 3. I think it's like 3, 4, the 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all him.
Yeah, well, the main reason I want to see 6 is it's Shawn Michaels, and
Yes.
Shawn Michaels is my era.
Oh yes.
Probably WWF, maybe even.
Right, it was WWF at that time. Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I in a future episode, I'm gonna have Chris Kavinsky from Bulletproof on to talk Return to Savage Beach, because that one's got Buff Bagwell, who was in the NWO and WCW at that time. And so Shawn Michaels, he was kind of one of the last holdouts on WWF when everybody was jumping ship to WCW. And then when they had all the injuries in WCW and they went under and Vince McMahon bought them, it was like they all came back over. But I think Michaels had established himself at that time.
Oh right, okay, yeah, no, he's I see he's got. I mean, he's had a few acting roles. He's not done a lot of acting because he never really did any, like, he never got cast as like action hero lead or anything when he was sort of in his prime. So I thought I'm quite interested to see what they do with him in this. I know he's done like 1 or 2 Christian movies and stuff. But so I think this, as far as I know, this is the only action role that he's done. Talking of WWF, WWE, and all that. There's that Vince McMahon documentary coming on to Netflix that I'm really looking forward to seeing. That's going to be really interesting. I was very much I haven't watched wrestling for a long time, so I don't know who a lot of the newer guys are. But I was a big fan in the Hulk Hogan, Bret the Hitman Hart kind of era. So I've got a particular fondness. So I'm really interested to see that. So we both like the one more shot. That was a solid recommend from both of us, I think.
Yeah, I think I think it's one of those things where we're seeing the world of DTV action. It's not quite what it was, I think, when we were getting into doing this in the late 2000s, but when we get these gems like this, I think it's really nice to be able to promote them. And, I think it's refreshing to see, like, okay, we know that there's people still out there that are making these at this higher level here, and be able to see it on a free streamer like Hulu. But like you said, to get the chance to see it in the theater, if anybody gets that chance, I think this is one that would definitely be enjoyable there.
Oh yeah, and so unfortunately, that's very, I say, it doesn't happen. I mean, even DVD, you can't pick up most of these films on DVD. I don't think One More Shots had a disc release, or not in the UK.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about the. I definitely know the Marine one. I'm pretty sure the Marine ones have. So James Nunn, not many of his, although he's making some of the best, not many of them are actually getting physical releases. So it is all basically streaming these days, most of it. And so the over here it was. Just as an aside, I'm curious. Do you happen to, when the film starts and it says the production companies and stuff, and the credits start and it says, such and such presents a such and such production. Does that must differ regionally, because over here, a company called Sky, which is a TV company, but they also put films in cinemas and stuff. So they One Shot and One More Shot are both say Sky presents a Sky original, stuff like that. So I presume in the States it would not say that, because Sky doesn't exist over there.
No, so in our case, it says Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. That's the
Okay.
the one that we get on our end. So yeah, so you get Sky Cinema, we get Sony Pictures, either Sony Releasing or Sony Home Entertainment. I think that's the one that we would get. Yeah, so I guess that, yeah, it depends on who the distributor is. And of course, I mean, we're so used to like so many. I mean, I wonder, because we see so many production companies. It is interesting to think about. I know one of them that you guys mentioned a lot is Bondit, which we see Bondit over here as well. Yeah, they're definitely ubiquitous. They're definitely across the pond. They're on both sides. But yeah, I guess yeah, if it's Sky there, because it's Sony here. It's also Sony. It looks like in the Netherlands. VOD was also Sony. So yeah, so some places had that. And I guess, yeah, Sky in the UK.
Well, that was when I'm watching it over here. One of the production credits on the one of the idents that comes up, or logos, was Destination Films on One More Shot, which they weren't involved in the first one, or at least not as far as in terms of production capital or production financing or whatever. Yeah, I quite like the fact that I think that maybe that another sort of thing that seems indicative of the film having a bit of a bigger budget than the first one is like a company like Destination Films, who did like I associate things like John Carpenter's Vampires and stuff like that. I seem to remember them, or I might be misremembering. I might be getting confused with something else. But I definitely remember some quite reasonable theatrical and DTV releases from Destination Films, who I don't actually come across that often these days. But I'm not sure if they're an offshoot of Sony, because they always seem to be related. Although I know Screen Gems is big Screen Gems. So anyway, I'm drifting, but yeah, seeing the Destination Films logo come up was quite cool. I enjoyed that. I always like to see who's associated with, when you see something like regular, if you see Grindstone Entertainment come up, you're gonna have a certain expectation, and same with Bondit and Highland Film Group and stuff like that. But Destination Films, I get a different vibe from that, and it's like it sets me up. I'm like, oh yeah, so we're in for something, of a good standard here, and it definitely delivered.
Yeah, I totally agree there as well. I don't know if you can hear kids outside.
No, I can't. I don't.
Oh, you can hear. Okay, so that means the listener can. Yeah, because this time of year on our block, the parents. I think it's more for the parents than it is for the kids, but they kind of congregate on our block, and their kids kind of run around and scream and things like that. But I think it's more for the parents to interact with adults, because they're used to interacting with kids for so long that they kind of ignore the kids, let them run around. But I wasn't sure if you could hear that. But yeah, but no, I think like to your point, I think it is nice that bigger companies are putting more money behind these. And I think James Nunn, I think he, with everybody else involved, I think they pay off whatever the budget was for this. It was a very solid film. So yeah, I guess as we're wrapping up here, Rich, did you want to plug anything?
Well, the DTV Digest is on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment. Shouldn't be too long, but at the time you're listening to this, it may have been a week or two since we put a show out, and it might be a little while longer. But please do check out our previous episodes. There's got well over 200. You can visit us at probably the best way to find us is just check us out on social media. You'll find all the links and stuff there. So we're on X and on Facebook. Just search for the DTV Digest. We've got a secondary X account, which is focused on short films, called DTV Short Shots, where you could, because we do sort of we promote, discuss short films as part of our as part of our format on the DTV Digest, as well as we do like a dedicated episodes of a DTV short shots show, which is infrequent. We haven't done one for a while, but we try to do little roundups and stuff every now and again, because we just don't get a chance to cover everything we want to talk about on the main show. Because on the DTV Digest, we usually cover a few new releases, a short film, and what we call the throwback, which is where we look at something that's, you know, either a couple of years old or 20 years old. It could be anything. Sometimes it's a favorite, sometimes it's something we haven't seen before, but that's often that and the short film part are probably my favorites, because sometimes the new releases can be interesting, but you know, they're always a bit of a mixed bag. But it's you know, and I think the stand, when you go back and you compare some of the older stuff, you see it to a different standard. I mean, One More Shot, obviously, you know, is kind of it stands out. Whereas, you know, if we're talking about some other stuff, you know, it just doesn't kind of cut the mustard. Whereas every now and again, you want to watch something like PM Entertainment or something that's really going to deliver on the action front, or other themes, because we don't just cover action. But anyway, you can find us on there. We've also just got recently set up a Discord. It's very early phases, but if anyone's on Discord and they want to look up the DTV Digest, you can find us on there. We'll try and start being a bit more active, and see how that goes. That's a bit of an experiment for us. Yeah, and I just want to thank you for giving me a chance to come on and talk with you once again. It's great. The you know, the film's really interesting. I love listening to your conversations with Ty, especially, as well, and as well as all your other episodes and stuff that you do. You're so busy with with your show. I can barely keep up with the amount of episodes. In fact, I can't keep up with the amount of episodes. But I try to keep up at least with the episodes with some of your guests, like Brett and Scott and stuff. And yeah, I've enjoyed a lot of those, and some of the you know, I definitely some of the stuff you say. I mean, like you were talking recently, and one of your things you were talking about was going to the theatre, and you know, people being on their phones and stuff in the screens. So I'm pretty sure you were venting a little bit about that at one point, and I can definitely relate. And have I got that right? Were you doing that?
Yeah, so it's Freddie
Yeah.
Young from Full Moon Reviews, but he was on, and because we were talking about Undefeatable, and then our conversation veered into conversation about, because I think there were some big movies that were coming out in the theater, like, you know, Deadpool, Wolverine, that was kind of close to coming out. I think I'm trying to think, Twisters, but well, there's a couple other big ones that had come, like Furiosa had just come out, so there's some big names. And so yeah, so we were just kind of chatting about it, and I was saying how I always just do Saturday morning or Sunday morning matinees. So there's nobody in the theater to bother me, whereas, you know, I think he's kind of from the school, you know, like a lot of other people. I don't know if you're probably the same way, where you kind of have that nostalgia for the Saturday night movie, where, you know, it was like an event where everybody went out to you know, you got dinner before, you watched the movie, maybe went to a diner or coffee or something after to discuss the movie, or pub or whatever.
I've always been a matinee guy.
Oh, you have your matinees. Okay, so you're a matinee like me. Okay, so you prefer the matinee. Oh, that's good. Yeah. It's nice because it's like, it's less likely to be as crowded. I think you can get your own corner of the theater a lot of times. But you know, if the person's in your eye line, even if they're like, you know, however many rows away and seats away, seeing that light flashing in you know, the corner of your eye can still affect the watching of the film.
Oh, I hate it. Yeah, so I really hate it. The other thing is, I swear, I was in the one film, and there was somebody, and it was a couple that came in together, and one of them obviously probably didn't really want to be there. She was just there to be with her other half, and she was watching Sister Act on her phone and knitting. Or something, and there was just weird stuff like that happens sometimes. Just really, it gets frustrating. I hate having screens in my island and stuff, which is funny, because a lot of theaters or cinemas, we you know, auditoriums, they have emergency exit lighting.
Oh yes.
So there's basically lights on all the time. Some of the overhead lighting and some of them is really too bright for me, but you get used to it.
Yeah.
But mobile phones, and also, and the other thing I hate is blooming smartwatches.
Yeah.
That somebody moves their wrist and the screen just lights up on their watch, and they've got they have I think it's the inconsistency of the light. I think if the light was on all the time, you would just get a bit like like what we're talking about with the concepts and novelties of the filmmaking devices and stuff on the screen. If something's there long enough, you stop noticing it. But because something's going on and off and it's moving around, it's just really frustrating. But yeah, so that I can definitely relate to that, and say a lot of the stuff you guys talk about with the movies, and that I don't get a chance to catch up on all the what is it? What was the? Obviously we've been talking about a little bit about Ryan Phillippe, and you did the Phillippe Factory earlier with Cam Gijonde.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that. Yeah, and I haven't seen those films or anything, but I'd forgotten actually that I still had to watch it, but I'm 2/3 of the way through Reckless, which I was quite enjoying. It's really interesting to see Dermot Mulroney doing.
Oh yes,
something like that.
Ruthless. You mean Ruthless?
Is it Ruthless or Reckless? Ruthless.
Yes. Yeah. Because that was our whole joke the whole time, that the movie had a lot of too much Ruth. It was he wasn't ruthless enough, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's interesting to hear you guys talk about actors like him sort of going into the DTV realm and stuff. And we haven't really covered that on the digest. I don't think we covered any Dermot Mulroney, but he certainly seems to be making his presence felt in DTV land alongside people like Mel Gibson and stuff. So thank you for all the work you're doing with your show. As a friend and a fan, I enjoy it all.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. And same with you. I one of the most recent episodes you guys did, you mentioned Cash Out, which is a movie Ty and I are going to be doing at some point probably for next month. But it was kind of, hearing you guys talk about it, it was kind of like I was like, okay, yeah, Ty and I definitely need to do this movie. Like, it was like, because he mentioned it was going to be coming out here in the States on on Hulu. Like it came out like just recently on Hulu, and it was like, yeah, we kind of bumped. I we had another movie in mind, and I was like, no. After hearing you guys discuss Cash Out, I was like, this is perfect for us. Like, it's gonna they kind of fit the bill. And so yeah, I think it's one of the great things about our different podcasts, between the one that you guys have with the DTV Digest, or ours, or comeuppance with their own site, with Brett and Ty, or Bulletproof, even John Cross After Movie Diner. I'm trying to think. I don't want to leave anybody out as I'm thinking of all the different ones.
Exploding Helicopter,
of course, that's the big one, right? He's the one that he actually got featured in The Guardian, which is absolutely amazing. Yeah, and I mean that one, like the disaster movies in particular, I just love, like when Will, whoever he has on, especially like is it Fred Anderson? I think is that he has that we'll talk about.
So.
Yeah, who's like an expert in the disaster movies. It's just it's fantastic. Or all 90s action all the time with Scott Murphy, where it's like movies from 30 years ago. You're just it's like, wow, that's right, that movie was 30 years ago. It's just it's kind of cool. Or just recently had Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast on, and it's like same thing, like movies that you wouldn't necessarily think is forgotten, but they are. And yeah, I think that the space, the our kind of we used to just be all written stuff for the most part, and I still try to write my blog as much as I can. But yeah, there's just so many great podcasts out there, and I just really always enjoy, like I feel bad because I feel like there's probably somebody I missed as I was listing everybody off, that somebody that didn't get mentioned on here. But I just, yeah, it's just so much fun to just listen to a podcast here, and like you said, like I think for me, because I with my job, a lot of times I have admin work, especially the second half of the day, so I can listen to podcasts while I'm doing my admin work. It's like all my meetings kind of are done by noon, so it's just fun to just sort of like hear what people are talking about.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I try to stay on top of I say as many of the shows as I can. I also like to, I like to listen to books and
Yeah.
audiobooks and things as well. So I have to try and mix it up, and sometimes go, oh, I've got like 3 episodes of comeuppance reviews to catch up on and stuff. And I don't actually. You haven't been on there for a while, have you?
No. So I think they had a technical issue where they would having trouble. Oh no, because they have Rich Pierce on. So I think they're trying to we're trying to work out be coming on at some point in the future. I think I had them both on when we did another Dolph Lundgren unsung. But yeah, I haven't been on there in a while either. So yeah, I think the last guest they had was Rich Pierce, the screenwriter.
Oh, that was a brilliant one. Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I haven't been on there in a bit.
Stuff in that episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, and one thing I don't know if the last time I spoke, whether it happened the last time I spoke to you, but we've got Tubi in the UK now.
Yes. Will mentioned it when he was on last time.
Yeah.
That you finally have Tubi now in the UK, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have nearly the range. And actually, I think Will said exactly the same thing. Was that the first thing I noticed was like, where is everything, basically, because the catalog is just vastly inferior. But there's some stuff in there, I found some good stuff. I mean, there was the I don't know if you've seen New York Ninja.
Oh yes,
which was the John Liu film that was basically lost footage that was reassembled by Vinegar Syndrome, and it got a proper release. But I saw that bringing out the Fighting Spirit Film Festival again. I got to see that on the big screen at the Fighting Spirit Film Festival, but it never had a UK release.
Yeah.
So, but now it's I've just recently found it on Tubi, so I was able to watch it again, like 2 years later, finally able to see it again. So that was great, and yeah, so good to have Tubi. There's a good 2 or 3 things. That there's actually another film that was incomplete until recently, which was Grizzly 2, which has got people like Charlie Sheen and stuff in it. Apparently it's awful, but I do want to check that out as well, and that's on there. And there's a few other I keep finding stuff, but I've already got quite a substantial watch list, even though even it's not as big as my list when I was using a VPN and I had access to the the original stateside Tubi, but it's still a substantial list nonetheless. And to say across all the platforms that I access, there's more films than I'll ever have a chance to watch, because I only have a chance to watch like a couple a week or 2 or 3 weeks.
Exactly.
But,
yeah, I'm the same way.
Great to have Tubi here, and so hopefully we'll find something. There'll be something that's on your Tubi and my Tubi, and maybe that'll be what we talk about next. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that sounds fantastic. Yeah, we'll kind of play it by ear and see what we have, but I think probably and we'll see, like if Tubi kind of builds out a little bit more and you see something on there that you're like, hey, I want to do, we could definitely do it. But I guess this is as good a place to wrap up as any. So thank you again, Rich, for coming on. This was a fantastic conversation.
Oh no, thank you very much, Matt. I'm sorry, I feel bad. I did my plugs and then rambled on a bit. I think it's now time for you.
I don't usually
plug a few of your bits.
though, because I don't do plugs anymore, because I do that cold open where I talk about what's come. So I've kind of just decided, like, I'm just gonna, the only time I do my plugs is when I do my solo, the DTVC extra. But it's like, if I do that cold open where I talk about what's coming up on the site, it's like I kind of feel like I'll leave let the guest let you do your plugs and leave mine. So so nobody has to so no worries there. No. Exactly. But thanks again, Rich, for coming on, and thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.